আমাকে জেরা করে দেয় সবাই। তারপরে আমি যাই থানায়, শ্যামপুর থানায়, বাংলাদেশের শ্যামপুর থানায়। তারাও আমার রিপোর্ট নেয়নি। তারা বলেছে আমাদের এই থানায় হবে না, তুমি অন্য থানায় যাও।
মানে এটা লোকাল থানা ছিল?
হ্যাঁ, ওইখানকার লোকাল থানাতেই যাই। তো তারপরে তারা বলে তুমি আগে হসপিটালে চিকিৎসা করে এসো। তো আমি একটু প্রাইভেট নার্সিংহোমে যাই। সেখানে বলে আমাদের এখানে হবে না, তো তোমাকে সরকারি হাসপাতালে যেতে হবে। তো মানে আমাকে
ভারতীয় হিন্দু বলে করছিল, মানে ফিরিয়ে দিচ্ছিল।
সেটা আমি ঠিক বলতে পারবো না, কিন্তু মানে আমাকে কোনোরকমভাবে আমি স্বাস্থ্য দপ্তর বলুন বা প্রশাসন বলুন বা পুলিশ বলুন, যেই বলুন, কোনো জায়গা থেকে আমি সহযোগিতা পাইনি। বরঞ্চ উল্টো আমাকে হেনস্থা করা ছিল। আমি ব্লিডিং অবস্থায় মিনিমাম আমি 4 ঘন্টা করে ঘুরেছি শুধু। আমার ব্লিডিং আটকানোর জন্য 4 ঘন্টা আমাকে ঘুরতে হয়েছে মিনিমাম। তারপরে
Laminates presents CNN News 18 Primetime Studio.
You're live from the CNN News 18 Primetime Studio, presented by Green Laminates. Viewers, instead of taking a position against the rioters of Sambhal for undermining the writ of the law, big tears, yes viewers, big tears are being shed for them. The ecosystem is having a meltdown, literally. No jokes. A senior Supreme Court lawyer even began to weep inconsolably on camera, bemoaning how the Supreme Court had let down Muslims in this country and that his India was becoming a cesspit of Hindu chauvinism. This lawyer and others in the Congress party ecosystem are upset that Hindus have been moving court to get them to order surveys on certain mosques to determine whether they were built on destroyed Hindu temples. Now, these self-styled activists that are part of the ecosystem or are directly part of the Congress party are convinced that the lower judiciary would not have ordered these surveys and upheld the sanctity of the Places of Worship Act 1991 had former Chief Justices Bodbe and Chandrachud not paved the way for, quote, dangerous, unquote, legal adventurism. Now today, in fact, a few hours back, the Congress and some lawyers have moved the Supreme Court seeking a stay on the survey of masjids. There are a number of reasons, and let me walk you through some of them. They say mosque surveys is a violation of the religious rights of 200 million, or 14.6% of the population of Indians. Another reason is the mosque surveys being ordered despite a bar imposed by Section 3 of the Places of Worship Act 1991 on the conversion of a place of worship of any religious denomination. Reason 3, mosque surveys added despite Places of Worship Act 1991 imposing a bar on the institution of fresh suits or legal proceedings. So they say that even legal proceedings or fresh suits are not allowed. Mosque surveys, they say, are against the spirit of the Supreme Court order in the Ayodhya matter that said, and I quote, the state has, by enacting the law, enforced a constitutional commitment and operationalized its constitutional obligation to uphold the equality of all religion and secularism, which is a basic features of the Constitution. Another reason given viewers is that mosque surveys, despite the SC setting aside findings of Justice Sharma of the Allahabad High Court, who ruled that the Place of Worship Act 1991 does not debar those cases where the declaration is sought for a period prior to the act came into force, unquote. Now here is an excerpt from lawyer Dushyant Dave's article that accuses the ex-CJIs for allowing Hindus to pursue legal recourse. Imagine, viewers, in our democracy, a community that is pursuing the matter through courts in a constitutional manner is being villainized, but a community that rioted against a court order is being portrayed as a victim. Anyhow, here's what Dushyant Dave has said, and let me quote him. He says, Chief Justices Bodbe and Chandrachud presided over benches with other learned judges that undermined the court's previous rulings and cleared the ground for dangerous situations. Likely taking a cue from such interventions, judges at the district and high courts are intervening at the instance of litigants who themselves are prohibited under the law from filing such suits, unquote. So does the law, viewers, bar the conduct of surveys? Did the ex-CJIs get it wrong? Were they favouring Hindus and being irresponsible? Now here are some hard facts, as always brought to you so you can separate the wheat from the chaff, so you can get closer to the truth, viewers. On the 20th of June 1995, the Supreme Court said the Place of Worship Act 1991 does not debar those cases where declaration is sought for a period prior to the Act came into force or for the enforcement of right which was recognized before coming into the force of the Act, unquote. 30th September in 2010, the Allahabad High Court built on this judgment, and Justice D.V. Sharma said, quote, the Places of Worship Act 1991 does not debar those cases where declaration is sought for a period prior to the Act came into force or for enforcement of right which was recognized before coming into force of the Act, unquote. So basically, viewers, both these courts came out and said, no problem with conducting surveys. 9 September 2019, the Supreme Court overrules, says the above conclusion of Justice D.V. Sharma is directly contrary to the provisions of Section 4.2, unquote. But viewers, this happened in 2019. 20th May 2022, the Supreme Court, and this is a obiter dicta really by Chief Justice of India at that time, Mr. D.Y. Chandrachud, who came out and said, and I quote, ascertainment of religious character of place of worship not barred under Place of Worship Act. This, as I told you, was a remark by the Chief Justice of India, Mr. Chandrachud. So he also went back to the two earlier iterations. 19 December 2023, Allahabad High Court, Justice Agarwal says the Act of 1991 is not an absolute bar upon the parties approaching the courts after its enforcement seeking their right as to place of worship or defining religious character of any place of worship, unquote. Now, while Dave, the Congress and others are entitled to their views, here's a small point to ponder. We're a secular country, viewers. All religions are said to be equal in the eyes of the law. But ironically, there are laws in this land, the Place of Worship Act being one of them, that impacts the rights of certain communities more than others. The Place of Worship Act 1991 is a stirring example. The Act undermines the equal treatment of religions under the law because it militates most against the Hindu community. After all, is there any denying that it is the Hindu community that has suffered the most at the hands of settler colonialists who sought to destroy their places of worship more than that of any other community? Should this community not have the right to peaceful reparations through the judicial system? Or should it be disenfranchised, barred from exercising its rights guaranteed under Article 32 of the Constitution? Viewers, think about it. In a secular country, everyone has equal rights. Why are Hindus being debarred in greater proportion? I know that the Place of Worship Act acts against all religions and tells them any person of any religion can't change the character of a place of worship. No one is even asking for that, viewers. But it's the Hindus who suffer the most. Anyhow, let's open this up, viewers. Let's open this up and let's ask some questions. Remember, at 9:27 sharp, Sai Deepak also joining us to hold a master class where he will rebut point by point Dushyant Dave, his own colleague. So stay tuned for that. That's going to be riveting. But let me open this up. We have Vishnu Jain, we have Dr. Anand Ranganathan, both of whom are very conversant with the Place of Worship Act. But I really want to begin with the other lawyers here, especially Tausif Khan. Tausif Khan, it seems that the India Alliance and those in the Congress that are moving these petitions, etc., want to disenfranchise Hindus. Why? Why, sir? They will bat for Waqf. They will act for Muslims and their rights in every context, including that of the Waqf. The TMC does so. But when it comes to the Place of Worship Act, they want that act to disenfranchise Hindus. Can you explain to me why is this the case?
I wish you were a lawyer, you had attended court proceedings, then you wouldn't be asking this question.
Right.
You see, Chief Justice that you are defending today, former Chief Justice D.Y. Chandrachud that you are trying to defend today, has allowed this ridicule by himself. He himself admitted divine consultation. He himself said that it was God's decision which allowed him to pass that awful judgment, and the Chief Justice himself meets Prime Minister, allows the Prime Minister to come and meet him at his residence for Puja Arati. So all these admission by Mr. D.Y. Chandrachud, while he was the Chief Justice of India, while he was supposed to decide cases on the rationality of law, rather than try to rationalize some divine intervention, then he's allowing himself to be ridiculed. He went against his own judgment. He was party of the judgment which upheld that the Places of Worship Act puts a bar on any religious places. The nature of it cannot be changed. And then he goes against the spirit of his own judgment and he says, oh, very well, survey can be conducted. Then opening a Pandora box, then yes, he will have to be held accountable for all the things that he has done wrong.
Okay.
There are no doubts he has done some good things as well.
Okay.
But he will be criticized for the wrong things he has done.
Now, viewers,
and history, we as a student of law will continue to ridicule him.
Okay. Now,
and
now,
we will
now,
continue
itne
to
khush ho
hold
rahe hain
him
aap, sir.
responsible
And you have
for
shot
the
yourself in the
controversial
foot. Now, let me
judgment he has
explain
done.
how.
Under
Now,
the political influence.
Okay, sir, okay, 1 second. Now, Mr. Khan said that the nature, he used these words, not me, the nature, because he is quoting the PW Act, the nature of a place of worship cannot be changed. The nature means whether it's a Hindu place of worship or it's a Muslim place of worship, you can't change it. But viewers, what if someone doesn't know what the nature of the place is? Can a place of worship be both Hindu and Muslim? Is the Kashi Vishwanath temple both? No, kyun keh rahe ho? 1 minute. So viewers, 1 second. No, I'm not lying. Now listen to me.
Chandrachud is blind.
Arey sir.
Chandrachud as a judge was
I'm
blind.
quoting you, I'm not quoting Chandrachud. I'm quoting you.
Offering prayers.
Okay, 1 second. Viewers, you heard him. I'm not cooking this up. He said that the nature of a place of worship cannot be changed. He's right, viewers. He's absolutely right. This lawyer has done his homework. But viewers,
you are wrong,
1 second, sir. Now let me finish, please. अब Khan Sahab, अब देखो अब आप गरम मत हो. Calm down, sir. Don't get all heated up. Relax.
You guys are blind.
Sir, I'm commending you for being right.
Namaz is being offered. That's a mosque.
Okay.
Oh, it has to be
So
something
fine,
else.
great.
Has to be conducted.
So viewers,
under
what?
political influence.
Okay, sir. 1 second. Now
Do not undermine
okay, should I
the
continue this
intellect
debate, sir,
of
or
the
you going to
people of
constantly
this country.
interrupt and I'll block you?
No, do
Then you
not
will cry that
undermine
your
the
right to
intellect
speak
of
has
the-
been blocked. Then you will do a protest, you'll hold up placards. So let me just step in. I'm also doing a sensible debate here, sir, with a very sensible individual like you. You are right. The Places of Worship Act does say you cannot change the nature of a place of worship. But viewers, what if you don't know what the nature of the place of worship is? The Place of Worship Act does not debar you from finding out the nature of a place of worship. Vishnu Shankar Jain will, exactly, right? Isn't it true? So viewers, you can move court and you can say, can you conduct a survey on this place of worship?
I'm saying it bars you from conducting a survey.
How, sir? Now,
That's
1
in the
second. Was
spirit of the law.
Chandrachud Chief Justice of India in June 20th, 1995? He wasn't, viewers, and this is what the Supreme Court said. Viewers, I always come with the hard facts. I don't muck about. So here it is. The Place of Worship Special Provision Act, 1991. This is the Supreme Court, viewers. Not my
Refer
Supreme
to
Court,
Babri judgment.
our Supreme
Refer to
Court. Now
Babri
listen to
judgment
this.
of Chandrachud.
Supreme Court, 20th June 1995, came out and said, the Place of Worship Act 1991 does not debar those cases where declaration is sought for a period prior to the act came into force or for the enforcement of right which was recognized before
Supreme
coming
Court
into the
has
force
overturned that.
force of the act, unquote. This is basically the Supreme Court, viewers. So Chandrachud, poor man, is only reiterating what the Supreme Court had said in 1995. Magar uske upar sab chad gaye. Everyone has jumped on him. Now let's open this up.
He's not a poor man. He's in consultation
Okay,
with
sir,
God.
he's a very rich man. Okay. case
No, he's
rested.
in consultation with God.
Okay,
These
he's
are
a
all
contradiction on everything, he's whatever.
These
But the
are
point
all
is, I'm not
numbers.
defending
These are-
Chandrachud, viewers, I'm only pointing out the point of law as it's established in 1995 when Mr. Chandrachud was not around as Chief Justice of India. Simple. Now, viewers, let me open this up. Let me bring in Vishnu Shankar Jain. I also want to bring in Dr. Ranganathan. He has some points. And Dr. Ranganathan, since you raised your hand first, let me bring you in immediately. Mr. Khan says, you cannot change the nature, cannot be change of a place of worship. He's right, isn't he? But who's stopping anyone from determining the nature?
Good evening, Rahul, and good evening to my fellow panelists. Look, I must admit, first up, I was moved to tears watching the lawyer Dushyant Dave crying like a baby on the Sambhal Mosque survey, blaming former Chief Justice for not exercising Places of Worship Act on every place of worship. I really was moved to tears because I could not believe this man could be a lawyer. How on earth did he manage to fool our judicial system and don the robe and defend clients? I didn't know WhatsApp University has started disbursing BA LLB degrees. He needs to be careful because if his other clients heard his ridiculous supporting arguments, they will plead before the judge next day, my lord. हमने हमारे वकील साहब को सुना है, हम अपने आप ही लड़ लेंगे केस, इनको मत लाइए बीच में.
What degree you hold?
Rahul,
Anand,
the law
what
may be
degree
an ass,
you hold?
but that does not.
Okay.
Rahul, please.
Okay, I'll have to know your fader, Khan Saab. You can rebut him after that. Koi problem nahi, sir.
Yeah.
You can even hold up a poster and ask him that question, but give him his 30 seconds. Thank you.
No, these people are rattled, but that's their congenital. You can't help it. Look, Rahul, the law may be an ass, but that is no reason for a lawyer to behave like one. Where to even begin? We are living in an age of wokeism, victimhood, selectivity, political correctness, and no one exemplifies it more than this dynasty slave Dave, Dushyant Dave. Was he jabbed with an anti-vax vaccine instead of a BCG as a toddler? You know, credence is given to any man's utterances only after knowing his antecedents. Islam, Dushyant Dave had claimed, came to India without conquering. Really? Akbar, he says, was mellow. Really? The Ghazi of Chittor and the man who ordered non-hijab wearing women into prostitution? Sabrimala, he says, was discrimination. Really? There are many Hindu temples where men are barred entry, and there are many Sabrimala temples where women are allowed entry. It was only in that particular Sabrimala temple that because of the vow of menstruating women to touch, the problem was particular age bracket would not allow entry. And menstruating women are forbidden to even touch Quran. Hadith Sharif says it. So are you going to redact these verses? Dushyant also wants to liberate Hindu women. But cat gets his tongue when it comes to allowing entry of Muslim women into mosques or ordaining women as Catholic priests. Now to this cringe-worthy wailing of his. Has he even read the Act, the Places of Worship Act 1991, and Act quote to prohibit conversion of any place of worship and to provide for the maintenance of the religious character of any place of worship as it existed on the 15th day of August 1947. But there is an exception. And this is what the conceited Dushyant Dave doesn't mention. This Act does not apply to any place of worship which is an ancient and historical monument or an archaeological site or remains covered by the Amara or Ancient Monuments and Archaeological Sites and Remains Act 1958. Now it is but obvious that the Sambhal Mosque is an ancient and historical monument, it even covered by the Amara Act, and therefore the Places of Worship Act should not apply to it like it did not apply to Gyanvyapi. Finally, Rahul, but here is the tragedy, you know. A legal recourse to correct historical injustices cannot be denied in a democracy, and they are. History written by the victors is being peddled by the vanquished. To me, the Places of Worship Act is one of the most barbaric legislations ever enacted in India. Historical injustices that are not covered under Amara can now never be addressed unless Parliament overrides it. Quote, no place of worship usurped or built upon another place of worship shall be allowed to be used as one unless its ownership is rightfully settled in a court of law, unquote. This, according to me, should be the real Places of Worship Act. As simple as that. Single sentence. And this is not a Hindu or a Muslim issue or a religious issue. This is an issue of justice. And Dushyant Dave doesn't know even how to spell justice, leave alone fight for it.
Wow, that's a real takedown. Mixing fact and rhetoric, viewers. You're going to hear, of course, a point-by-point demolition by Sai Deepak. It's a masterclass. Do stay tuned. It will come up in exactly 10 minutes. 12 actually, to be really precise. Now, Let me bring in Vishnu Shankar Jain. Your response to the petition moved in the Supreme Court seeking a bar on any mosque surveys because, Vishnu Shankar Jain, it is being said that they are an assault on Muslim rights. How do you respond to this?
I think it is an incorrect legal approach, because if someone has a issue with regard to a particular area, he has a right under the general law to approach the civil court, and the civil court has also the right under Order 26, Rule 9 and Rule 10 to order for scientific investigation and to order for an appointment of advocate commission. So to say that you cannot go to the court, or to say that the courts can't pass such an order, if this kind of relief can't be granted by a higher court, because under our constitution there is a three-tier system, and every court has its own right and jurisdiction to pass and decide a particular case. If a party is aggrieved by the order of a particular court, for example, Civil Just Senior Division, he can approach against that order by way of a first appeal to the High Court, and against that order by way of an SLP to the Supreme Court. But to say that the lower court can't hear the matter, such kind of writ under Article 32 cannot be issued, is my legal opinion.
Well, how specific?
And I would also like to add that order of passing survey, order of direction of conducting a survey is not illegal. It is within the domain of Places of Worship Act, because Places of Worship Act does not debar from ascertaining the religious character of a place of worship. And what is the religious character on a particular day, that is 15th August 1947, will be decided by way of evidence in the suit. So every right, it's a civil right, it's a civil dispute between two communities. Every dispute you can agitate before the court of law, and court with the moment the dispute arises, the court is well within its jurisdiction to pass an order for appointment of an advocate commission under Order 26, Rule 9 and 10 of the CPC.
Now, Vishnu Shankar, how specifically are you maintaining this point of view? Because POWA 1991 says there can be no fresh litigation.
I think it's not a correct view, and the judgment which is holding the field is the judgment delivered by Honorable Justice Rohit Ranjan Agarwal of the Allahabad High Court in Gyan Vyapi case on 19th of December 2023, wherein he has held, the Honorable Allahabad High Court has held that to ascertain the religious character, suits can be filed, and in the suit by way of evidence only it can be decided that what is the religious character of a place of worship on 15th August 1947, and this judgment has not been stayed by the Supreme Court till this date. So the judgment which holds the field is this. Apart from that, there is one more judgment of the Supreme Court itself, the only judgment, where two Christian churches were having a dispute with regard to a property, and the Supreme Court also in that case has held that to ascertain the religious character, cases can be filed, and under the Places of Worship Act, religious character ascertainment is not debarred.
No, so which exact SC judgment are you referring to? Is it the June 20th, 1995 one, Mr. Jain?
Yeah, so this is a case where two churches of the two churches were fighting amongst each other, and the matter had travelled to the Honorable Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court went on to the issue that unlike the English courts, colonial courts, there used to be ecclesial courts in this country. But when the constitution came into place, there was no scope for ecclesial courts in this country. Ecclesial courts means courts where you decide a particular issue on the basis of the norms of the religion. So, and then it went on to interpret the provisions of the Places of Worship Act.
Right.
In that judgment, it's a three-judge bench judgment of the Supreme Court. In that judgment, the Honorable Supreme Court has held that Places of Worship Act does not debar ascertainment of religious character, and cases can be filed to ascertain the religious character. And this is the same view which was adopted by Justice Dharamveer Sharma of the Allahabad High Court when he was sitting in full bench in Ram Mandir case on 30th of September 2010.
Okay, so viewers, there's legal precedence. As Dr. Ranganathan was saying, somebody was not actually being either true to the precedents or were basically peddling some sort of an agenda. Now let's open this up. Lokesh Jindal and the BJP, the Congress and the BJP tonight, viewers, on this. Lokesh Jindal, why do you want to disenfranchise Hindus? Your lawyers fight against Hindus to be awarded the Ayodhya land dispute. Yours now go to the court to say debar Hindus from pursuing the court process, the judicial process. Kya karega Hindu? What do you expect him to do, sir?
God-friendly. Good evening, Rahul. Nobody wants to debar the Hindus.
Right.
In fact, recently, the Indian Olympic Association, it has filed a letter of intent to conduct the 2036 Olympic Games to the International Olympic Committee, and it has stated that religious diversity, secularism, is one of the major themes on which the 2036 Olympics would be held in India. And Taj Mahal is to be the centerpiece on which the Olympics would be held. Internationally, we trumpet that India is a land, it's a secular nation. We say that religious diversity is preserved in India, but an act that truly preserves this religious diversity, that is the Places of Worship Act 1991, that is not acceptable to us. This is hypocrisy. Now, either the BJP, it should refrain from going to the international fora and claiming that we are a secular nation, we uphold the religious diversity. It should come out openly that it's the land of Hindus, it's a Hindu nation, and as the policies that it follows domestically is what should be upheld internationally. But what we see is domestically, we want to object. Places of Worship Act, Section 4 of the Places of Worship Act clearly states that the religious character of an institution is based upon the religious practice which was carried out since 1947. Now, Rahul, if a monument was made in 16th century or it was made in 12th century, both the monuments are ancient monuments. Nowhere in 1958 Act do we have any form of a discrimination with respect to a monument that was made before and a monument that was made after that particular year. So when 1947 is the year that has been decided, Places of Worship Act 1991 clearly is in accordance to the secular spirit of the Constitution. I do not see there is any reason to criticize it, or there is any reason to carry out surveys and politicize a monument and a society that is having peaceful coexistence. So, Rahul, over here, it is just a political agenda. The institutions, the laws are being misused for political ends, and it is harming international credentials.
And harming international credentials, political agenda. Very quick rebuttal coming in from Dr. Ranganathan. I want to bring in the BJP's national spokesperson, Pradeep Bhandari, right after.
As I said, look, the proof of the pudding is in the eating, and eating the Congress exemplifies. They are the ones who are communalizing it. As I said repeatedly, now there are 6 people on this panel. I'm not being patronizing, but I am perhaps the only one who's not a believer. I'm an atheist. Now, as I have said repeatedly, this is not a religious Hindu-Muslim issue at all. This is an issue for justice. Let me ask Lokesh Jindal, who's been waxing eloquent over the last 5 minutes. Were the Hindu side wrong in demanding the Ram temple at Babri Masjid? It's a single yes or no question. You have the guts to answer it. Answer it.
No, they were not wrong. No, they were
why
not wrong.
were they not wrong? How is that different? How is that different from Gyan morally? Please listen to me.
No.
Please don't interrupt me. Now that I've got you, please don't interrupt me.
You asked the question,
how
let me answer
is demanding Ram temple different from demanding Kashi Vishwanath temple, different from demanding Mathura temple? How is it different?
You read the sections under Places of Worship Act 1991.
Don't bring Places of Worship Act. Just tell me why are the 3 temples different?
I will talk about what the law is, what the law states.
You tell me why are they different?
The Places of Worship Act 1991 has clearly barred Ram Janmabhoomi from all other ancient monuments.
Communal bigotry. You don't see this as justice.
One second. Let me just look. Even if you look at the Place of Worship Act, and Pradeep Bhandari, first, why don't you respond, and I'll just come back to that Place of Worship Act that Mr. Jindal is referring to. Yes, Pradeep Bhandari, go ahead.
Well, Rahul, thank you so much for coming to me, and I would request my panelists to give me 2 minutes of time. I've been patiently hearing a very erudite lawyer and an extremely erudite friend, academic, and 2 political opponents who are very, very weak on facts. So let me just quote facts, Rahul. Rahul, the principle of the argument is, does the Constitution of India not allow the Hindu to visit and approach the court? The right to go to a court is a fundamental right as per a 1997 judgment of the Supreme Court. Now, my second question is that why is the Congress party in the Indian opposition from backdoor trying to disenfranchise the Hindus from approaching the court and trying to villainize the Hindus when they approach the court? That is point number 1. Right to know is a part of right to life under Article 21, and I'll tell you and prove it. 30th November, National Herald, the official newspaper of the Congress party, what does the Congress party writes on Sambhal, and I quote, Congress party says, how far will a court judgment go in triggering a riot? They are indirectly threatening a judge that if a judge passes a civil order allowing a survey, in his judicial wisdom, the Congress party is accusing the judge of threatening a riot. Whereas, when the judgment is in the favor of the Congress party, the same National Herald, the editorial, which is backed by Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi, quotes, whereas the Nainital two-judge bench of the court gave a restraining order which allowed the law and order to be maintained. So for an even day, the court is good for the Congress party, whereas on an odd day, the court is bad for the Congress party. Why? Because on one hand, it serves its Tushikaran agenda. On the other hand, the court gives the right to the Hindus to approach the court. That is point number one. And is it for the first time? No. When the Congress party was in power, it disenfranchised the Hindus. Remember what happened in the communal violence bill? The Hindus were made to be believed as an accused. They had to prove their innocence, which was against the tenet of the Constitution of India. Well, remember what happened in Ram Mandir case? It was Mr. Kapil Sibal in the Congress party, when it was in power, ensuring that the judgment delays. So every time when the Hindu is the victim, the Congress party only and only disenfranchises the Hindus. And it's not limited to the Congress party. It's a pan-opposition phenomena. Remember what happened at the time of CA? CA was a constitutional guarantee which was given by our constitution makers. The Congress party in the Indian opposition provoked people to come to streets. Any one Indian Muslim has lost their citizenship? No. Have they apologized? No. And I'll end it by going to core of why all of this happens. All of this happens because, as Dr. Ambedkar said, and I will quote it, and please listen to this very, very carefully. On 27th of October 1951, Dr. Ambedkar in a speech in Jalandhar said, and I quote, Mr. Nehru has developed a fascination for only and only Muslims and has completely ignored Dalits and all other communities. Nehru has become a Muslim maniac. So right from the time of Congress, Nehru's time, Motilal Nehru's time, the only focus of the Congress party is Muslim vote, and now it has stooped to such a level where this Constitution of India, which is given by Baba Sahib Bhimrao Ambedkar, it wants to disenfranchise the Hindus the right to approach the court.
Okay, very
I
quickly.
really commend, around 5 seconds.
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
I really commend Pradeep Bhandari, my brother, for saying, making his points brilliantly. And he rightfully says, he's absolutely right when he says the Constitution gives the right for every Indian citizen to approach the court. So I have a very simple question to ask him. Congress evil है anti Hindu है. भाई आपके पास 10 साल थे. Why did you not abrogate the Places of Worship Act? That does not allow every citizen to go to the court. आपके पास पावर थी 10 साल तक. आपने abrogate क्यों नहीं किया? कांग्रेस तो गलती ढूंढ रहे हैं.
अभी U-turn मार दो आनंद.
Can I respond to Anand?
Anand,
Yeah. Mr. Bhandari, respond please. Respond. Yeah.
Well, Anand, I think it's a very valid suggestion which you have given, and I do believe that since the matter right now is in the court, we will look at it, and it is, and I neither am I giving you an affirmative yes or no.
थोड़ा पकड़े गए, Mr. Bhandari, you got a bit caught out there.
At this moment,
थोड़ा LBW हो गया. Third Empire is going to take a decision. That's okay. But the point is, viewers, coming back to this business of.
नहीं हुआ राहुल जी. राहुल जी, सरकारें ऐसे नहीं चलती. पहले दिन पे अगर आप जब शो कर रहे हो तो अगर पहले दिन पे आप एक टॉपिक करो तो लोग बोलेंगे कि 3 और टॉपिक क्यों नहीं करे आपने देश हित में. तो इसका ये मतलब थोड़ी है कि हम देश हित में नहीं है.
Okay, fair enough.
नहीं करेगा राहुल जी.
Okay, fair enough. Good point. Okay, but I just want to make a small suggestion here, viewers. You see, the Congress leader on our show came out and said the Places of Worship Act, you see, forbids you this, that, the other. Now, viewers, we all know that the Kashi Vishwanath temple and the Shringar Gauri temple, which are within the Gyanvapi Mosque complex, fall under the 1958 list of ASI protected monuments. Now, what does this act say about those buildings which are under ASI or are on the ASI list, viewers? Section 4, subsection 3 of the Places of Worship Act 1991 states, nothing contained in subsection 1 and subsection 2 shall apply to any place of worship referred to in the said subsections which is an ancient and historical monument or an archaeological site. Viewers, therefore, even Gyanvapi, etc. are exempt from the ambit of the Places of Worship Act. The Hindus are doing the right thing. They're going to court. They're not picking up stones. Neither are they shooting their way into any of these mosques. They are waiting for the courts to give them. They are waiting for the courts to give them directions. If that is not constitutionalism, viewers, then nothing is. Then we should really be crying.
So
buckets.
easy to purchase orders.
But let me move on. Because joining us, viewers, let's go across. Let's put out the agents provocateurs. Let's go to people who have dissected this law. Let's go across to senior lawyer Sai Deepak, who practices both in the Supreme Court and the High Court, and who has done some remarkable work on advancing Hindu interests by studying the Places of Worship Act 1991. Now, thanks very much for speaking with me, Mr. Sai Deepak, and taking time out. I know you've just been elevated to the title of a senior advocate, so you're probably very busy, and thank you very much for taking the time out on the first days in court as a senior advocate. But many top lawyers are arguing that the mosque surveys are illegal. They reek of retributive justice. That's what they're saying. That there is a bar imposed by Section 3 of the Places of Worship Act 1991 on the institution of fresh suits or legal proceedings. Now, how do you react to this, Sai Deepak?
It's not called retributive justice, it's called reparative justice. Retribution is in the mind of the victim or the perceived victim. Reparation is from the perspective of the actual victim. Okay? Now let's start with the clarity on the law or the legal position itself. The Places of Worship Act does not, by any stretch of imagination, either through its black letter or in spirit, come in the way of any of the surveys that are being undertaken with respect to these occupied sites. Point number one. Two, it's easy to simply confound or confuse the general public by citing Section 3 of the Places of Worship Act without drawing attention to Section 4, subsection 3 of the very same piece of legislation that specifically says if you manage to establish that an underlying structure is an archaeological site or a heritage structure, which if you go back to the 1958 Act, which is the Archaeological Act of 1958, it becomes abundantly clear that anything that is beyond 100 years or over 100 years specifically constitutes for treatment or qualifies for treatment as a heritage structure. Once that is established, the Act makes it abundantly clear, that is the Places of Worship Act makes it abundantly clear, that the fetters imposed by the Act or the bar imposed by the Act with respect to character conversion of a particular place, they don't apply. None of the provisions apply. Okay? So as far as I am concerned, any such statement that is being made, I would say is a legally unlettered submission. Unfortunately so, if it's being made by anyone who's trained in the law. So legally, I don't see a problem. Two, why should this lead to the conclusion that this is retributive justice when the world over every civilization and country which respects itself has brought in its right of return or has invoked its right of return to specifically take back its occupied sites which it believes represent or represents the native culture or the indigenous culture of the land. So the reason or the backdrop for this entire conversation happens to be the motivated violence in Sambhal. If a particular party or a particular group chooses to stand in the way of the law and decides to pick up the weapon in response to a court-initiated procedure, and that too in resistance to a court-appointed committee for the sake of verification, who is coming in the way of the law, who is standing in the way of the rule of law prevailing, and why should such parties be indulged and incentivized through cloaks of perceived victimhood? That's the simple question that you should be asking. Why can't we actually ask for a position where the Indian state says no one will take law in their own hands and ultimately let matters be decided on the basis of evidence by a court of law? That's perhaps the most constitutional position, that's perhaps the most non-confrontational position that anybody can take.
There is a view that the Mosque survey is against the spirit of the Supreme Court order in Ayodhya judgment that said, quote, the state has, by enacting the law, enforced a constitutional commitment and operationalized its constitutional obligation to uphold the equality of all religion and secularism, which is a part of the basic features of the Constitution, unquote. And this is why many people say that because it was mentioned, we shouldn't have all these surveys. Your response?
So there is a problem with the reliance on this particular portion of the Ayodhya judgment. I have written extensively on this, so let me quote from my own articles on the subject. One, the 10-paragraph discussion that was undertaken in the Ayodhya judgment on the Places of Worship Act is superfluous to that entire judgment, because the Places of Worship Act was never an issue in the Ayodhya case. What is the meaning of this? Section 5 of the Places of Worship Act specifically says that no provision of the Places of Worship Act shall apply to the Ram Janmabhoomi dispute, which means the statute is inapplicable to the dispute. When a statute is inapplicable to a dispute at hand, any discussion on the statute in a judgment on that particular dispute doesn't constitute the central reasoning of the judgment. It constitutes what we call obiter dicta, which means side observations, marginal observations. First of all, therefore, they have no binding at all, or in the sense they have no binding value or precedential value. Because the law as laid down by the Supreme Court is only the finding of a court on an issue in question and which is relevant to the dispute at hand will have some value for future cases. Since Places of Worship Act was fundamentally irrelevant to the discussion on Ayodhya, there is no question of it having any binding value subsequently. Two, no discussion was undertaken in the Ayodhya verdict on the impact of Section 4.3 and its interplay with Section 3 or Section 6 or Section 4.1. Okay? The first time that this issue is being taken up is as part of the batch of petitions filed before the Supreme Court on the challenge to the Places of Worship Act, where some of us have taken the position, and Vishnu has already taken this position, Mr. Vishnu Shankar Jain, in the Kashi case and other cases, that the survey is not barred by the Places of Worship Act. And the very same Supreme Court, when the orders of the district court in the Kashi case were challenged before the Supreme Court on the ground that the suit itself was not maintainable because of the Places of Worship Act, said that it's for the trial court to take a decision. Even the Supreme Court did not press into service the Ayodhya verdict to say that these suits are unmaintainable. And if the fundamental basis of the suit is a survey, then the survey is kosher, the suit is kosher, and the reliefs are kosher.
Well, your own contemporary, another senior advocate of the Supreme Court, Mr. Dushyant Dave, has written that the mosque surveys are being ordered despite the Supreme Court setting aside findings of the Justice Sharma of the Allahabad High Court that ruled that the Places of Worship Act in 1991 does not debar those cases where the declaration is sought for a period prior to the act came into force, unquote. Now, isn't this therefore reason enough to stop these surveys?
Not at all. And I'll answer this question. And I wish the gentleman or the person who has written the piece had actually bothered to go through the judgment of the Supreme Court in the Ayodhya case. I went through the Allahabad High Court judgment, the 3 volumes, as well as the Supreme Court judgment, where the Supreme Court cites Justice Sharma's reason, or let's say cites Justice Sharma's analysis to venture into a discussion on the Places of Worship Act. If you remember, Rahul, you and I have already had a discussion on this particular issue, so let me refresh your memory as well as the audience's memory on the subject. Justice Sharma in the Allahabad High Court was not discussing the Places of Worship Act. Justice Sharma was citing another Supreme Court judgment of 1995 where this discussion had taken place, and he was quoting it in a different context altogether. When the judgment of the Allahabad High Court goes up in appeal before the Supreme Court commits an error. That is, the Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court committed an error in mistaking Justice Sharma's extraction of a previous judgment as Justice Sharma's opinion itself. And then it embarks on a discussion on the Places of Worship Act for 10 paragraphs. So there is an article that I wrote on this very subject on two different platforms. The New Indian Express, I wrote this as soon as the verdict came out of the Supreme Court. Then I've also written this in the Open magazine, explaining this issue in greater detail. Plus on my blog, it's a 2-part article which I've written on my blog called Yukti, which is a constitutional law blog, where in detail I've captured this entire thing. Therefore, there is no applicability of the Ayodhya verdict to this particular case. The discussion in the Ayodhya verdict on the Places of Worship Act was both factually erroneous and legally irrelevant.
So are you referring to the 1995 Supreme Court judgment that involves a dispute between two churches? Can you elaborate on this?
So basically, one of the questions that was being asked, I think, in the 1995 case was whether religious disputes can be contested in suits of civil nature, or do you need only writ petitions? One of the answers that was given, to the best of my memory, was that a right under Article 25 is equally capable of being contested through a suit. That's one. Second, the question of character of conversion of a Christian place and the cutoff date as prescribed in the Places of Worship Act was the subject of the discussion of the Supreme Court verdict in 1995. Now, remember, the Ram Janmabhoomi dispute has no, let's say, discussion with respect to the Places of Worship Act in the entire three-volume judgment of the Allahabad High Court of the three judges, because that the entire legislation is inapplicable to the act. So why would they discuss something which is not even relevant to it? So during the course of a discussion on the nature of a civil suit and whether religious rights and constitutional rights can be contested through civil suits, a particular paragraph from the Marthoma judgment, from the Supreme Court judgment of 95, is extracted. That discussion is mistakenly assumed by the Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court in the Ayodhya dispute as a discussion on the Places of Worship Act by Justice R. S. Sharma. Frankly, it is a clear case of clerical error where the Constitutional Bench of the Supreme Court misunderstood the entire context of the discussion.
Now, just to clarify, has the Supreme Court overruled the verdict of the Supreme Court Justice R. M. Sahai, who ruled in the most revered PMO Metropolitan and others versus Moranmar Morthoma and another on June 1995, that, quote, Act doesn't debar those cases where declaration is sought for a period prior to the Act before it came into force for the enforcement of a right which has been recognized before coming into the force of the Act. So how did Justice Bodbode and Chandrachud greenlight these surveys, sir? Please clarify.
One, this was an error. And second, since the Places of Worship Act was never the direct subject of dispute in the Ayodhya verdict, whether or not a survey could be ordered under the auspices of the Places of Worship Act or outside of it was never in contestation there. Therefore, when that issue comes up for a standalone examination in Kashi, Mathura and now Sambhal, then everybody is suddenly looking at Section 4, subsection 3. And those who are citing the Places of Worship Act to prevent these surveys selectively cite only Section 3 or Section 4.1 without drawing the attention of the audience or the court to Section 4, subsection 3. Which is why when Justice Chandrachud and subsequent benches were presiding over the appellate proceedings or the interim appellate proceedings that emanated from Kashi or Mathura, they specifically said whether or not these suits are barred by the Places of Worship Act. Firstly, that call has to be taken by the trial court first, because the Supreme Court cannot venture into an examination of an issue when the trial court is still considering it. Two, if they truly felt that this was so egregious an issue, because the Ayodhya judgment has already closed the door on this particular subject, they would have said as much. But they know for a fact that that was not the situation. So what I would suggest is, you take up, you can perhaps ask your viewers to simply Google Ayodhya verdict and the Places of Worship Act. You will find a New Indian Express article written by me on 3rd of June 2020, where I specifically discussed this verdict and whether there was any impact of the Places of Worship Act or the Ayodhya judgment on each other. Can I just read maybe 5 lines from that particular article? Can
Please
I just
go
do
ahead.
That with your...
No, please go ahead. Please go ahead.
So, in paragraph 80, the Supreme Court in the Ayodhya verdict specifically says that Section 5 of the Places of Worship Act expressly exempts the legal proceedings in relation to Ram Janmabhoomi from the application of the Places of Worship Act. So, the Supreme Court itself said in paragraph 80 that the Places of Worship Act was irrelevant to the dispute. Therefore, it had no reason to subsequently proceed to discuss it further. So, which is why I said, in light of this, there was no need for the court to discuss the act in the context of Sri Ram Janmabhoomi, and yet the court deemed it fit to discuss it in over 10 pages, with the central thrust of its deliberation being the Constitution's commitment to secularism. The stated reason for this discussion is captured in the said paragraph. The court reproduced what it believed were the observations of Justice D.V. Sharma, who was part of the majority opinion of the Allahabad High Court. Extracted below are within quotes the observations of the Places of Worship Act, of Justice Sharma, that ostensibly triggered the Supreme Court's discussion on the Places of Worship Act. So there is one paragraph 1C which is captured in the judgment of the Allahabad High Court. If you realize and if you read it further, there is no such paragraph of Justice Sharma itself, because he is quoting another judgment of the Supreme Court, which he just pointed out, which is PMA Metropolitan and Moran Marthoma and another, delivered in 1995. And what did Justice Sharma do? He extracted paragraphs 43 and 89 1C of the Marthoma judgment in his judgment, which the Supreme Court mistakes as paragraph 1C of Justice Sharma's observations.
Oh.
Anybody, if they had just bothered to go through the original Supreme Court judgment of 95 and then the Allahabad High Court judgment, they would wonder, how did the Supreme Court make such a basic error in conflating two different judgments?
Well, I'm glad that we've addressed this issue, because those who are looking at the fine print, viewers, and the fine points will have gone into this, and I'm glad that Sai Deepak has set that to rest now. But let me just ask you, finally, aside from the letter of the law, I would like you to respond to a specific charge made by the same lawyer, Mr. Dave, and he says, and I quote, Chief Justices of India, Bodhbe and Chandrachud, presided over benches with other learned judges that undermined the court's previous ruling and cleared the ground for a dangerous situation, unquote. Now, Sai Deepak, this criticism is in line with many who feel that the judiciary has turned saffron today. Your response to this?
Frankly speaking, nobody had a problem as long as judgments were being delivered in favor of a particular minority group. But when a non-minority group manages to establish its case on the strength of the law within the four corners of the Constitution, suddenly the entire institution is being painted as having turned saffron. In which case, I must ask myself the simple question, does this clique believe that the majority should not have any access to any kind of reparative justice remedies before the Supreme Court, and that too through a legal process? Nobody has been able to actually point a finger to the legality of the process or at the legality of the process through cogent arguments. Everything is based on misrepresentation. So I must clearly say here that the Supreme Court has acted in accordance with the Constitution by upholding the letter of the law and the spirit of the law. And secondly, if somebody has to focus extensively on the spirit of the law, that means they admit that the letter of the law certainly does not support their position. That's when they resort to all sorts of vague arguments. I am giving a very clear response on the basis of the express language of the Places of Worship Act, express language of the Ayodhya verdict of the Allahabad High Court as well as the Supreme Court, and the 1995 verdict of the Supreme Court in the Marthoma Church case. Can someone counter this and tell me that factually and legally this is wrong? I will happily debate them in public, word by word, para by para, on these very assumptions.
Well, Sai Deepak, thank you very much. As always, exacting and brilliant. Thank you very much for going into the details, viewers. I know it was a bit scholarly or academic, but sometimes it's important to dissect the issue and get into the weeds. Thank you very much, Sai Deepak, for doing that. Let's move on, viewers. The Prime Minister today set aside some precious time in the day to watch a special screening of the Sabarmati Report in the Parliament Library. And there you can see those pictures. The Prime Minister is there with the film crew. He's sitting with the entire cabinet pretty much of the NDA government. All the NDA allies, their top leaders, everyone was in that movie theatre watching this movie. The movie recaps the events of the Godhra train burning of 2002, the backlash to this act of alleged communal mischief that led to the death of dozens of Kar Sevaks returning from a pilgrimage to Ayodhya is widely believed to have triggered the Gujarat riots. However, viewers, the India ecosystem, India bloc parties have a big problem. The Prime Minister has, of course, come out and said today that the filmmakers have done a commendable job. But as I said, while the filmmakers have got some sort of a affirmation from the Prime Minister, the India bloc is taking pot shots They've said instead of Sabarmati Report, the Prime Minister should watch and act on Roti Kapda or Makan. Now let me very quickly bring in Dr. Anand Ranganathan if he's there with us. Dr. Ranganathan, why is suddenly the India bloc getting so tetchy about the Prime Minister watching this movie?
We've seen this, Rahul, before during the Kashmir files and other movies that have been made, I think Kerala Story as well. Anything that is to do with correcting the wrongs that we were taught for decades on end, anything to do with at all. And the whole, this so-called, quote unquote, I hate to use this word ecosystem because they're just basically lemmings who think one way and act that way, being told. They descend upon you as if you've done some crime. We've seen this. We've just had this discussion of Place of Worship Act. They don't want history to be told the way it should be told. They don't want the truth to be outed. This is the problem. I asked them a very simple question. Of course, they don't know the names of the 59 Hindus, men, women and children who were burnt alive. But do they know who Haji Bilal and Abdul Razak was? You ask a Congressee this. He will say, no, I don't know. I'll tell you who they were. They were Congress leaders who were convicted for the crime of burning that Sabarmati train coach and sentenced to death. Congress leaders. That is the reason why they never want the truth to be out. That is the reason why they never want the 1984 truth to be out. This is the reason why they say the Kashmiri 1990 Hindu genocide did not happen. And every time there is an attempt, feeble or strong or supported by the government or not or independent, every time an attempt is made to bring out the truth, these guys start fidgeting like junkies as if God knows what will descend. Well, I'll tell you what will descend. Truth will descend and you can't do anything about it.
Well, that I'll just also want to very quickly include the 1984 anti-Sikh riots as part of that list, viewers, where this ecosystem, the Congress party, went out of their way to not allow the truths to surface. So much so that we've had now, of course, commissions set up and finally 2 top Congress leaders brought to book. Otherwise, viewers, there would have been absolutely no justice even there, and the truth would have once again been scuppered under the hand. I leave it at this, viewers. Thank you very much, Dr. Ranganathan. Thank you very much, viewers, for watching. Coming up, Palki Sharma with Vantage.
Presented by
শান, তুমি কবে গিয়েছিলে বাংলাদেশে?
আমি নভেম্বর এই মাসের 23 তারিখ বাংলাদেশ গেছি।
আচ্ছা, কি কারণে?
কি হয়েছিল তোমার সাথে?
আমি বাংলাদেশ গেছিলাম আমার একজন পরিচিত বন্ধুর বাড়ি। সে থাকে ঢাকার জুড়েনের বাগানবাড়ি অঞ্চলে। তারপর যখন আমার 26 তারিখ রাতে ফেরার কথা ছিল ভারতে আবার, তো ফেরার সময় ফেরার কিছুক্ষণ আগে 8:30টার দিকে আর বন্ধু বললো, ভাই আজকে তো ফিরে যাবি, চল একটু ঘুরে আসি বাইরে, তো বাজারে বেড়ানো। ঠিক ওই সময় তার বাড়ি থেকে কিছুটা দূরেই 5-6 জন মুসলিম যুবক মিলে আমাকে আটক করে। তারা আমাকে জিজ্ঞাসাবাদ করে যে তুমি কোথা থেকে এসছো, কোথায় থাকিস, নাম কি, ধর্ম কি। তো এইসব জিজ্ঞাসাবাদ করে আমি বলি যে আমি ইন্ডিয়ান, আমার ধর্ম এই, আমি নামি। তো তাও তখনই এটা শুনে ইন্ডিয়ান তারপর হিন্দু, তখন তারা আমাকে টেনে নিয়ে যায় কোনায় অন্ধকারের দিকে। তো তারপর তারা আমার পকেট হাতানো শুরু করেছে, অনেক টাকা পয়সা পকেট এইসব, আমার ফোন নিয়ে নেয়, টাকা পয়সা নিয়ে আমাকে মারধর করে, চড়থাপ্পড় দেয়। তারপরে আমিও নিজে সেলফ ডিফেন্স করার চেষ্টা করি, তখন তারা আমার মাথায় পাথর দিয়ে আঘাত করে প্রচণ্ড জোরে।
বন্ধুকে বাঁচানোর চেষ্টা করে?
আমার বন্ধু বাঁচানোর চেষ্টাই করে, সে নিজে আহত হয়েছে। ওরও ফোন কেড়ে নেওয়া হয়, মানে ছিনতাই করে নেওয়া হয়। তারপরে ছুরি দিয়ে আমার চোখের উপর চালানোর চেষ্টা হয়, চোখে লাগেনি, সরে গেছিলাম। হ্যাঁ, ওদের তো অস্ত্র ছিল, অস্ত্র দিয়ে আঘাত করে আমার এইখানে ছুরি দিয়ে আঘাত করা হয়। তারপরে আমি যখন তারা তো চিল্লাচ্ছিল যে ইন্ডিয়ান হিন্দু বলে মারছিল, তাই আশেপাশের মানুষেরাও খুব একটা বাঁচাতে আসছিল, কেউই আসেনি। শুধু একমাত্র আমার সেই পরিচিত বন্ধু যে ছিল সেই আমাকে বাঁচানোর চেষ্টা করে যাচ্ছিল। তারপরে আমি যখন ব্যাপারটা একটু ঠান্ডা হলো, মানুষজন জড়ো হলো, তারা পালিয়ে যায় ওখান থেকে। দিয়ে আমি যে হেল্পলাইন নাম্বার বাংলাদেশে আছে 999, আমি অ্যাম্বুলেন্স ডাকবো বা পুলিশ ডাকবো, কল দিই, তারা উল্টো আমাকে জেরা করা শুরু করে যে তুমি কি করতে গেছো ওখানে, তোমার ওর সঙ্গে সম্পর্ক কি, তোমার কি লাগে, কিরকম বন্ধু, কিরকম পরিচয়, আমাকে মোটামুটি
মানে বাঁচানোর জন্য আসে।
বাঁচানোর জন্য কি আসেনি, বরঞ্চ যাচ্ছে তাই আমাকে জেরা করে যায় সবাই। তারপরে আমি যাই থানায়, শ্যামপুর থানায়, বাংলাদেশের শ্যামপুর থানায়। তারাও আমার রিপোর্ট নেয়নি, তারা বলেছে আমাদের এই থানায় হবে না, তুমি অন্য থানায় যাও।
মানে ওটা লোকাল থানা ছিল?
হ্যাঁ, ওইখানকার লোকাল থানাতেই যাই। তো তারপরে তারা বলে তুমি আগে হসপিটালে চিকিৎসা করে এসো। তো আমি একটু প্রাইভেট নার্সিংহোমে যাই, সেখানে বলে আমাদের এখানে হবে না, তো তোমাকে সরকারি হাসপাতালে যেতে হবে। তো মানে আমাকে
ভারতীয় হিন্দু বলে করছিল, মানে ফিরিয়ে দিচ্ছিল।
সেটা আমি ঠিক বলতে পারবো না, কিন্তু মানে আমাকে কোনো রকমভাবে আমি স্বাস্থ্য দপ্তর বলুন বা প্রশাসন বলুন বা পুলিশ বলুন, যেই বলুন, কোনো জায়গা থেকে আমি সহযোগিতা পাইনি, বরঞ্চ উল্টো আমাকে হেনস্থা করা ছিল। আমি ব্লিডিং অবস্থায় মিনিমাম আমি 4 ঘন্টা করে ঘুরেছি শুধু, আমার ব্লিডিং আটকানোর জন্য 4 ঘন্টা আমাকে ঘুরতে হয়েছে মিনিমাম। তারপরে ঢাকায় মেডিকেলে গিয়ে যখন আমি অনেক রিকোয়েস্ট করে আমি এগুলো পাই, তারপরে আমাকে চিকিৎসা দেওয়া কোনো রকম জাস্ট সেলাই করে ছেড়ে দেয়, আদার্স কিচ্ছু করেনি, শুধু সেলাই করে ছেড়ে দিয়েছে। তারপরে আমি রাত 3টে পেরিয়ে যাই করতে করতে। তো আমি ভাবলাম যে সকালবেলা অন্য কোনো থানায় গিয়ে চেষ্টা করবো কেস করার। তারপরে সকাল হলো, সকালে হওয়ার সাথে সাথেই এলাকার মানুষজন, যা নেতা বলুন বা ওখানকার কিছু গণ্যমান্য ব্যক্তি, সবাই জড়ো হয়ে আমার ফ্রেন্ডের বাড়িতে চলে এলো। বাড়িতে এসে তার ফ্যামিলিকে শাসানো শুরু করলো। তার ফ্যামিলিকে শাসাতে মানে এরকম
ওখানকার রাজনৈতিক ব্যক্তিত্ব,
ওখানকার আইনজীবী বলুন বা রাজনৈতিক ব্যক্তি, সবাই প্রত্যেকে ওখানে চলে এসেছে। আমার ফ্রেন্ডে ফেলেছে যে আমি তো চলে যাবো এখান থেকে।
কি হুমকি দিচ্ছিল যে এখান থেকে চলে যাওয়ার জন্য, নাকি কোনো রকম আইনি পদক্ষেপ নিতে? না,
আমাকে আইনি পদক্ষেপ নিতে বারণ করছিল এবং এটার জন্য হুমকি দিচ্ছিল যে আপনি ইন্ডিয়ান হিন্দুকে বাড়িতে কেন রেখেছেন,
আচ্ছা,
আপনাকে তো মেরে ফেলা হবে, এইভাবে হুমকি দেওয়া হচ্ছে। আমার বন্ধুর নাম আমি
তারপরে
তো তারপর আমি বললাম ঠিক আছে ভাই, আমার জন্য তোরা কেন সমস্যা নিবি, আমি একটু সুস্থ হয়ে বাড়ি ফিরে আসি। তো যতদিন আমি ওখানে অসুস্থ অবস্থায় ছিলাম ততদিন তারা এসে আমার বন্ধুর ফ্যামিলিকে সমানে শাসিয়ে গেছে, সমানে তাদের মানে বাড়ি থেকে বেরোতেই পারবে না এমন একটা সিচুয়েশন ক্রিয়েট করে দিয়েছে। তো আমি কালকে মানে 30 তারিখ, নভেম্বরের 30 তারিখ সকালবেলা ভোরবেলার দিকে আমার বন্ধুর সঙ্গে লুকিয়ে আমি ঢাকা স্টেশনে এসে আমি বাড়ি ফিরে আসি আমাদের ভারতে। তো মানে
কতটা আতঙ্কিত
আমি তো
খোঁজ নিয়েছো যে তার বাড়িতে আবার অ্যাটাক হয়েছে?
হ্যাঁ, সেটা তার বাড়িতে আপাতত অ্যাটাক হয়নি, কিন্তু সমানে তাদের শাসি যাওয়া হচ্ছে যে কেন রাখা হয়েছে, ইন্ডিয়ান হিন্দুকে কেন রাখা হয়েছে।
কতটা আতঙ্কিত এই বিষয়ে, কতটা আতঙ্কিত, কি পরিস্থিতি?
এখন তো আমি আতঙ্কিত নই, যখন ওখানে ছিলাম তখন আতঙ্কিত ছিলাম।
Hello, namaskar. This is First Post and you're watching Vantage with me, Palki Sharma.